My name is Meron, and this is a game of two halves, and this will be the first episode in a mini-series that I've cleverly called Football Data versus Scouting Opinion. And today's deep dive will focus on one of the most important areas for any player on the pitch, which is the passing ability. And I'll be using probably one of the greatest passers in Premier League history, which is Kevin De Bruyne. In my role as head of player analysis at a data analytics firm, I've had first-hand experience as to how data can improve the success of signings and the analysis of players. However, the scout's opinion and the knowledge can be just as important as the data, and it also helps fill in some details that data actually can't provide at this moment in time. To demonstrate this, I'm going to be exploring Kevin De Bruyne's passing stats from the 2022 to 2023 season, and this will be compared against other midfielders from that season within the Premier League. There's a reason I've chosen this season, it's not by accident, and it's that he achieved a remarkable feat of 16 Premier League assists within one season. So surely the data will tell us that he is an amazing, incredible passer, and there's no need to look or even think about a scout's opinion. One of the most common statistics that's used to analyze a player's passing ability is pass completion rate. And that's sort of how often are they successfully completing a pass to their teammate. And if we jump into Kevin De Bruyne's stats for the 2022-2023 season, you can see that he completed around 44 passes per 90 and attempted around 60 passes per 90. And that would put him at 73.3% pass completion rate. So if you see, he's in the 11th percentile within this statistic. So if you're a person that doesn't know anything about football and you jump into this and you try to use this statistic as a measure for a player's passing ability, you may think that Kevin De Bruyne is quite a poor passer. Opta have removed this from sort of the midfielders' radar that they sort of provide to clubs or to people that are able to pay the money to get the data, especially for midfielders. And that's because it is not an indicator of passing sort of ability on its own. Now, at the extreme ends of pass completion rate, you might be able to determine sort of some information. So if they're about 100% or 99% pass completion rate, you might think that they're able to retain the ball well. Or if they're at the 40, 50, 60% pass completion rate, you might think they're a bit careless, they're not making the right passes. But just from the statistic alone, there's so much information that you need to actually build a profile of this player. And so when you jump back to the stats, you're able to build a bit more of a risk profile. I think that's the kind of thing you want to understand from a player. You know, the person that has a 100% completion rate may not be taking any risks. They might be playing sort of sideways and backwards to teammates, whereas the one that has a 40 or 50 or 60% pass completion rate, they might be taking more risks with the ball that have success every now and again that actually provide value to their team. Now, if we jump back into the stats for that season for Kevin De Bruyne, you can see that there's a few extra sort of data points that might point towards sort of risk profile and the type of passes he was attempting within that season. So if you look at the expected assisted goals, expected assists, key passes, sort of passes into the penalty area, progressive passes, he's in the 99th percentile for all of them. And that's good. That indicates sort of a count of what he's doing, but it doesn't indicate sort of the quality of those passes, which we'll come into sort of later in the video when we talk about the scout's knowledge. But as a basic sort of starting point for a risk profile, this starts to paint a bit more of a brighter picture of Kevin De Bruyne, which matches the 16 assists that he got in that season. Now, why is a risk profile an important sort of starting point when trying to understand a player's passing ability? And importantly, when you're trying to compare them against other players in their position. Now, if you spotted earlier, I said that this data compares Kevin De Bruyne to other midfielders from the Premier League season. But you don't want to compare someone like Rice to Kevin De Bruyne or a Kante to Bruno Fernandes. You might want to compare Rice to Kante, probably that box to box, where you're probably trying to analyze a few more different data metrics like their progressive carries, the defensive contributions, tackles won, different kind of passes they're probably trying to attempt from that sort of player role. And separately, you want to compare De Bruyne with Bruno Fernandes, who are probably more of the playmaking type of roles, taking more risks on the ball, number of through passes or passes through the third they're attempting. So you can see there's a difference in the type of way you're trying to analyze the players. Midfielders is a very general term, but able to build that sort of risk profile from the data points, you're then able to sort of compare similar or like-for-like players in a certain position. However, even once you've built this risk profile, there's a lot of information that we still don't know yet about the quality or effectiveness of the passing. Just because De Bruyne is in the 99th percentile, it's more of a count of sort of those metrics than the quality of those passes. And I think at this stage, this is where you need a bit more information outside of the context provided by the data. Whilst watching different leagues around the world in my previous role, players can pick up an assist or expected assist for fairly simple passes or passes that have a few more things going on that led to the successful outcome for the team. And this is where I'm going to jump into where the scouting's knowledge on opinions come into it and provide the extra layer of sort of information that can help a club feel comfortable signing a player based on their passing ability. So there are 5 factors that as a scout or sort of a team of scouts, you might look for when trying to analyze a player's passing ability. And that starts off with the technique. And this could be probably one of the most fundamental things that I notice as being consistent among all great passers. They're able to generate really good connection on the ball through little backlift and very little follow through, whilst remaining really balanced at the same time. The poorer passers seem to have a big run up, big follow throughs, falling off balance. And when you're able to spot this technique element, you do understand what makes a good passer very early on into your assessment of a player. The next sort of factor that I look for is the connection on the ball. So this is exactly how to connect with the ball. It can be outside of the foot, in step, and also the weight of the ball, how punchy it is, and the power generation as well. If you're able to combine that technique of little follow through and backlift as well with a really good connection and weight of the pass, you're starting to build a nice idea of how good a passer is. The difficulty of the pass is the third factor, and this is actually quite an important factor that probably doesn't get factored into the sort of data points for passes. Opta actually are bringing out, I think they've already brought out expected pass, which kind of builds in the difficulty and the likelihood of success of a pass. But from the eye test, you can start to determine, the pressure around the passer. Did they receive it on their first touch and have to play quickly? Is it a first time pass? What's the relationship between the player and the ball? Are they striking it on the half volley, full volley, on the ground, flat, on an angle? When you start to combine a lot of these factors, you start to build a difficulty value of the pass itself, which then gives you a bit more leeway as to whether it's successful or not. The fourth point is the vision, and this is an underrated one. This is one where, there's some players that, just have that extra level of sort of ability to understand when a pass is on that others can't see. And Kevin De Bruyne is one of the best at that. I think I remember a goal last season against my club, Newcastle, where he was able to thread the ball through 2 or 3 players' legs from quite a distance away. And it was insane. You watched it and you think, wow, how did he see that? This is something that, although you might have seen a run, you were not able to see a pass being played the way he played it. And this is something the data finds hard to pick up in terms of vision. Then the last point are sort of the external elements, stuff outside of that passer sort of control that he has on whether it's successful or not. So that's the quality of the run, the space that the pass has to play into, and probably the most important is the level of defending. Sometimes sort of a pass is cut out, but the pass is amazing, it's dead on, but it's just the level of defending is able to sort of react to the passing triggers, and head it away at the last moment. So don't think just because a pass is unsuccessful that pass is not a good pass. There's other external elements that might be going on that lead to the sort of unsuccessful nature of that pass. Now, I've picked out 2 passes in particular, and I'm going to sort of look to explore the factors that I've mentioned previously, and stuff that you should be looking for when analyzing a pass as a fan, a content creator, or a scout at a club. And the first one is versus Sevilla in November 2022. And as we jump into the pictures here, you can see that Kevin De Bruyne picks up the ball in the half space or the right channel, in between the lines. Halves starts to make a bit of a run against Jose Angel, the centre back, number 30. And although there's space to play in behind, which I said can be a limiting factor, the line that Kevin De Bruyne chooses to play this pass is pretty ridiculous. He plays it kind of a curled, flat pass in between the two centre backs. And it's one where the weight and trajectory has to be perfect. You can see that defender, Jose Angel, number 30, actually tracks Alvarez's run pretty well. He covers off most of the line, especially when there's a lot of space to play in behind. He reacts to Alvarez's run. At the same time, Alvarez makes the run itself. And so this pass has to be played, the pass that Kevin De Bruyne chooses, not like a lofted pass in behind just for Alvarez to somewhat catch up onto. He plays a precise sort of pass in between the two centre-backs, shaped. And, it's so close that the defender thinks he can actually cut it out, so attempts to sort of intercept it. But that's how good the ball is, that even though the run is tracked well by Jose Angel, that he's still unable to intercept this pass. And Alvarez sort of runs on clear, 1v1 on goal, and scores for Man City. And this is some of the stuff that I'm talking about in terms of, when you look at the technique, the sort of connection on the ball that he's able to obtain, and that weight and line that he's able to sort of get in between the two centre backs. When you sometimes look at a pass through the passer's eyes rather than that TV angle, you start to see this is a really, really tricky pass to execute perfectly. Now, the second pass that highlights how good a passer Kevin De Bruyne was, especially in that season, is versus Man United in October 2022. And feel free to go back onto YouTube and watch this one, because this one, even though I'm showing you the pictures here, is better live, especially when you start to analyze the technique. Kevin De Bruyne picks up the ball in the right half space, and Haaland starts to make that movement in behind Varane, but Varane sees it and just adjusts his position quite well. But the pass that we end up seeing happen is not what anyone would expect. Haaland probably makes that initial movement because he's waiting for Kevin De Bruyne to pass it out wide and then get across into the box where he can make sort of that secondary movement across Varane. But this is not what Kevin De Bruyne does. And what makes it even better alongside the vision is a technique. And this is some of the stuff to look out for, the small details from a scout's perspective that is hard to pick up from the data points. And that is that he actually takes a small touch just before the pass, which is, really you'd want it out of your feet so that you can curl it. But he just takes a normal touch and then realizes this could be on and goes straight into the pass. Minimal backlift and follow through in this, and still stays upright even though the ball's tucked right underneath his feet. Then manages to sort of shape it around Varane. Haaland didn't even make a run. He reacts to the ball after the pass is played or just as the pass is being played. But this pass shouldn't really be possible. I think Varane, I don't blame him at all here in terms of he gets into the right position, sees the Haaland movement initially, but doesn't expect a ball this perfectly weighted when it's this underneath Kevin De Bruyne's feet. It goes against what you would see in this position, and this is where the vision comes into it as well. And these are the exciting bits as a scout that I love to see. You spot stuff like this at the lower level from a player, and you start to go, well, I'm going to watch them a bit more. They're doing something a bit more out of the ordinary. But this is ordinary for Kevin De Bruyne in that season and generally across his career. But this is the kind of stuff that a scout would be looking for, especially with assessing passing ability. So when you start to look at the earlier data points, such as progressive passes, key passes, expected assists, even pass completion rate, because those riskier sort of playmakers, the Kevin De Bruynes, the Bruno Fernandes, they're not going to have a high completion rate. They're the ones that try and stuff that's trying to hurt the opposition, probably unsuccessful most of the time, but when they do pull it off, create such high value for their team. You're able to build a risk profile with these data points, and then you add in the eye tests, just like we did earlier when you're assessing the technique, connection on the ball, difficulty of the pass, the vision, and sort of those external elements like the level of defending. When you're building all this information up into sort of that sort of assessment, you're then able to sort of understand a bit more using the data and the scout's opinion how good a player is at passing the ball. So, data or scouting knowledge? Which one is the most important in assessing a player's passing ability? And the answer is both. Data provides such huge value in sort of narrowing down sort of a list of players that you might want to assess. When you see Kevin De Bruyne's passing statistics, you might want, any player above 80, 85 percentile. And then from there, you might then pass it on to the scout's opinion, where you're able to build a bit more understanding as to, does the data match what I'm spotting with my eyes? And if not, why is that? And I'll leave you with probably the most poignant point of the whole conversation, taken from Ian Graham, who highlights the experience of Nate Silver in his book, The Signal and the Noise. And he states that data seems to have lost the edge over scouting. The scouts have started using statistics. Scouts plus data beats either on its own. So you can never use data on its own, and you can never use the scout's opinion on its own. That's probably back in the day when the scout's gut instinct was used a bit more, whereas now you don't want to overdo it with data and not use the scout's opinion. The combination of both is where the power lies in assessing not only the passing ability, but sort of other traits that you might want to assess for a position or player. And on that note, I'll be exploring other player traits in this special series called Football Data versus Scouting, so stay tuned on that. In the meantime, check out some of my previous episodes, specifically why football clubs fail at scouting, and I'll catch you on the next episode of A Game of Two Halves.